Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to all of you joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Eder Zobel de Ayala, a proud member of the board of the Center for Asian Philanthropy and Society. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to the launch event of the Doing Good Index 2024. Over the past year and a half, the CAPS team and our research partners from across 18 economies in Asia have worked tirelessly to gather insights from over 2,000 social delivery organizations and over 100 experts to shed light on the complexities of Asia's social sectors. This report represents months of dedicated effort, collaboration, and a deep commitment to advancing our mission to improve the social investment sector in Asia by identifying and disseminating best practices, models, policies, and strategies that can contribute to positive systemic change. One of the reasons that I'm delighted to support the Doing Good Index is the way it captures the intricacies of what it's like for social delivery organizations operating across the region. The report covers topics such as the regulatory conditions for nonprofits, tax and fiscal policies affecting the social sector, and the relationship between the social sector and different stakeholders, including the private sector, government, and the public. As a co-founder of a nonprofit dedicated to improving education quality and access in the Philippines, we ourselves have faced some of the same challenges, such as securing funding, finding talent, and navigating the regulatory landscape. Now, in its fourth iteration, the Doing Good Index is uniquely placed to showcase social sector trends, and I believe the rich insights from this year's report can provide a roadmap for philanthropists, companies, government, and the social sector to drive more research into doing good. Today, we have the privilege of bringing together like-minded change makers and dedicated professionals advocating for the social sector, both in person and online. As we hear more from CAPS, our research partner organizations, as well as from my dear friends and established philanthropists, I want to emphasize the power of collaboration and knowledge sharing. The launch of this research report serves as a reminder that when we come together, bound by a shared vision of social change, we can overcome any obstacle. In closing, I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation to each and every one of you for joining us today. Your presence today is a testament to your unwavering commitment to social impact and your dedication to creating positive change in our world. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the valuable discussions and shared learnings in the upcoming sessions.
The Doing Good Index is a study of the regulatory and societal environment in which private capital is directed toward doing good in Asia. It is based on data from 35 indicators under 4 sub-indexes: regulations, tax and fiscal policy, ecosystem, and procurement. After tabulation, the index categorizes the economies into 4 clusters: doing well, doing better, doing okay, and not doing enough. The findings are evidence-based, derived from survey data collected from 2,183 SDOs and 140 experts across 17 economies, and supported by a network of partners and experts across Asia.
We wanted to understand what are the factors that enable people to give more and what holds them back. What are the obstacles?
It builds a body of original data. This data doesn't really exist, and it provides a landscape of philanthropy in Asia.
It allows us to understand the social sector in our own country, in Bangladesh.
Having something like a Doing Good Index, which contextualizes country information in the backdrop of the region, which is more relatable to the country, is fantastic.
It's like validating your work. Like, where is the gap? What needs to be improved?
It's like a report card of social sectors.
It seems like we have made some community with the research partners.
Particularly helping us to cultivate that, what I call the data-driven culture within the social center, and use data as a common language to talk about issues and challenges.
I think this kind of data is very important because without data, you really get nowhere.
Topical, rigorous, and reliable.
Rich, insightful, and collaborative. Teamwork, network, and a lot of work.
So thank you again for joining us today. I am delighted to be sharing the fourth iteration of the Doing Good Index with everyone. It is the labor of love for us, the culmination of 2 years of really hard work by team here at CAPS, as well as all of our partner organizations in 17 economies in Asia. And Ruth already thanked them, but I do also want to just express our gratitude for all their work in helping us collect the data. This fourth iteration is the first one to come out after the global pandemic, but the data that we collected actually took place in, I think it was April, May, June last year, which was for the time when many Asian economies were really only just emerging from the pandemic. And what we saw was that the governments were refocusing their attention away from the public health pandemic that really had captured most of their attention for the past few years, and refocusing on a lot of the other social and economic needs that economies are facing. And unfortunately, those are many. We know that there are still a multitude of social and environmental challenges in the region. The UN, in fact, predicts that the region is about 32 years behind on reaching the Sustainable Development Goals, which is really not great. There was a lot of progress made in the past 10 years, but then that was really pushed back for many cases in the past few years during the pandemic. The good news is that there is a lot of potential in the region for several reasons. The region is seen still as the engine of growth. Amid a global expected economic downturn, Asia is still expected to account for about 60% of Asian GDP, which is promising. There's also really large growing middle class, as well as ultra high net worth individuals. In fact, Asia holds about 25% of the global rich, which bodes well for philanthropy, if only we can really unleash all that money. The Asia for Asia philanthropy, how can we get people and companies to give more to the social sector that really needs it? That's where the Doing Good Index comes in, because it really helps provide a roadmap of the policies and practices to help unleash this giving, to help incentivize companies and donors to give more, as well as pathways for creating an enabling operating environment. Slide. While we're waiting for the next slide. So we base our findings on data, the data that is collected by our partner organizations in 17 economies, and it's unique data. This doesn't exist anywhere else. Oh, yes, I forgot. There's a table of contents. This is briefly what we'll be talking about. I'll be talking about where the economies stand, overall performance. Natalee will go into a little bit about the technological aspect of things, followed by how can we do better. There will be time for Q&A at the end. Here in the room, of course, you can just ask your questions in person. Online, please type your questions in the chat box. We'll try and get through as many as we can, but otherwise we can also follow up with you afterwards. So, as I said, we base our findings on really unique data. This data doesn't exist anywhere else. We collect this ourselves. It is based on, as Ruth said, surveys from SDOs. And let me just explain what we mean with this term SDO. Social Delivery Organization. You may not have heard it anywhere else. It's not yet a very well-known concept, but we believe that it better captures the type of organizations that we survey. Nonprofit, what we often hear, doesn't really capture everything, because there are a lot of organizations that do in fact have a for-profit income stream. Non-government organization also doesn't cover it because there are, in fact, a lot of organizations here in Asia that are affiliated with government. So we like to use this term social delivery organization. So we surveyed over 2,000 organizations. And again, thank you to all of those who might be on this call today. We know this is a big ask. It takes a lot of time, and we are extremely appreciative of the time that you take out of your already busy schedules to complete that survey. We also, through our partner organizations, survey experts, accountants, tax lawyers, social sector leaders, government representatives to really fill in paint the full picture of the regulations and the policies. All that together feeds into our index. The index consists of 4 sub-indexes. 3 of these have to do with government, regulations, tax and fiscal policy, and procurement, and which is when the government procures services or goods from the social sector. The last one, ecosystem, is kind of the societal embrace for doing good, the extent to which individuals and company recognize doing good, appreciate it, and encourage it. So based on that, we then produce this lovely table with 4 clusters. It is not a league table. The countries and economies are listed here in alphabetical order. And each of these clusters represent the regulatory and ecosystem environments for enabling doing good. It is not, as I said, a league table. And as you can see, we've got Bangladesh not doing enough, unfortunately, and at the top doing well, Taiwan and Singapore. And let me just go a little bit more detail into these 4 categories. At the top, yes, next slide, we have doing well. Taiwan and Singapore have sat in this category since the start of the Doing Good Index in 2018. And what we really see in these 2 economies is that the government has really recognized the importance of the social sector and sees social sector organizations as valued partners in addressing social needs. And this is reflected in a very enabling regulatory environment as well as attractive tax incentives. But there is always room to do better. In these economies, we see there's room for improving recruitment as well as tax procurement. There is actually a 5th category, doing excellent, but there is no economy that has yet been able to reach that, but who knows? Hope springs eternal. The 2nd category is doing better. Here too, next slide, yes. We see in these economies too, they perform above average on regulations and tax, indicating as well here that the government is largely on board and recognizes the importance of the social sector and is often working with them and recognizing their importance. Performance on the ecosystem sub-index, however, is more mixed, indicating that their society is at times perhaps lagging here. In the 3rd category, next slide, we almost see a reversal of that. Here, the government is often unsure of how to engage with the social sector. The regulatory environments are not as enabling, sometimes having very burdensome rules and regulations, but performance on the ecosystem sub-index actually is comparatively high, indicating that it's the people and the companies that are really embracing this much more. New to this cluster is Sri Lanka, which moved up from not doing okay in 2022. Last slide. And as I mentioned, Bangladesh sits still in the not doing enough cluster. Although they do well on a fair number of indicators, which should be emphasized, there is room for improvement across a multitude of areas. But we hope to see that improve over time. Next slide. Now, as we mentioned, we send out this survey to all these SDOs every year, which is a wonderful opportunity to add more questions to an already very long survey. But it is an opportunity to capture data on topics that we know are of interest and to add to our body of knowledge. And this year we focused on technology, the opportunities, the challenges, and the usage of technology by social sector organizations. And to that, I will hand over to Natalee to tell us more.
Thank Thank you very much. Next, thank you. And so during the past 2 decades, technology has developed at an unprecedented pace. I don't know about you, but I use technology for pretty much everything, from messaging my friends and family to doing my work and payments, and I'm sure that's the case for all of us here. Digital technology has become embedded into daily life and to business operations. In Asia in particular, digitalization has been exponential. It is home to half of the world's internet users, and COVID-19 only accelerated these trends. When we were unable to meet online, when able to meet in person, we made things work online, and this is now the norm. So it is without argument that digital technology is here to stay and that it will continue to advance rapidly. So against this backdrop of digital advancement, we wanted to use this iteration of the Doing Good Index to understand how social sectors are responding to this digital change. And in particular, how have social sector organizations across the region adopted and maximized digital technology? Next slide, please. So firstly, we found that most organizations have a basic technological readiness, such as access to internet and to IT software and hardware. While this is not yet universal, these numbers are really high. So 84% of SDOs have reliable internet connection in the office, which is good. And 70% of SDOs have sufficient hardware for their staff. And this is also really great news. But do they know how to use it? Slide. And the answer is mixed. 59% of SDOs have said that their staff lack the skills to really leverage the benefits that digital technology has to offer. And to make matters even more urgent, the World Economic Forum has said that Asia is now the new ground zero for cybercrimes. In fact, our data shows that a significant majority of organizations do not have a plan for cybersecurity, and the goalposts for what organizations need is only going to keep moving. Because the data we have here, as Annelotte mentioned, was taken a year ago, but just think about how much AI has already advanced since. So organizations and their staff really need to be equipped for the rapidly changing digital landscape. But how do they do that? And the answer is more funding. 88% of SDOs intend to increase their use of digital technology, but more than around half have said that their donors do not support IT and digital costs. And around the same percentage have said that it's really hard to secure unrestricted funding. So it's very clear that what organizations need to help them support their digital transformation, and donors here have an important role to play. Firstly, they can be more supportive of operational funding, which can help help SDOs have more longer-term technological investment. Asian SDOs need to future-proof themselves by investing in the necessary technological infrastructure, software, and skills. Next, donors can also provide in-kind donations, and this can include volunteering to provide IT training to SDO staff. It can involve getting a more subsidized rate for software, whether for daily operations or for cybersecurity, or even basic donations of hardware can go a long way. And next, now we're going to talk about the results from the index itself. And now the data from the index is very rich, but today we're only going to highlight 3 top-line findings. Firstly, we see a continuation of the status quo. So now, while the years of COVID-19 are behind us, perhaps surprisingly, the results of the index have stayed largely the same. But this lack of change is nonetheless a telling finding. After a few tumultuous years globally and in Asia, stability can lay the groundwork for the social sector to thrive. As mentioned earlier, Sri Lanka is the only economy that has changed clusters from not doing enough to doing okay. And its improvement is partly due to some economic recovery, as well as the clarification of regulations that have come in with the new NGO Secretariat. Funding has also not changed that much either. As in 2022, the most important source of funding for SDOs remains domestic funding, and as it should be, because wealth in Asia is growing, and so there is capacity within the region to fund SDOs and to support our local communities. And that is one of the goals of our index, to increase trust so that people can give more often, and with higher impact. Slide. We also see that governments continue to send mixed messages. Now, what do we mean by mixed messaging? On one hand, there are measures being taken by the government that make it more difficult for the social sector to do good. And on the other hand, there are an equal number of measures, if not more, that make things harder. And here are a few examples. The ease of setting up an SDO varies across the region. In some economies, it is smooth and quick, but in others, it is difficult and time-consuming. We also see that the majority of SDOs find social sector laws very difficult to understand, and this ranges from 28% in Malaysia to 77% in Korea. Now, it goes without saying, if you don't understand laws, it's very difficult to follow them. And lastly, on the slide here, around 3/4 of organizations are involved in policy consultations with the government, but these are usually with only a select group of organizations, or their inputs are not incorporated in practice. Next slide, please. So besides challenges from the regulatory environment, what else is holding SDOs back? Now, it comes as no surprise that funding is the top challenge for SDOs, with 75% of organizations citing this as one of their top needs. And this is followed by the need for collaborations and the need for upskilling and reskilling of staff. So the Doing Good Index shows us what the needs of the social sector are, and they are many, but it also provides a roadmap for the policies and practices that can unleash private social investment into the social sector. And I'll hand it back to Annelotte to talk us through this.
Great, thank you, Natalee. Next slide. So how can we do better? Firstly, next slide. SDOs need to be able to operate easily, need to ensure that they are not burdened by undue regulations and administration. We also need to ensure that donors, whether they are domestic or foreign, are able to donate freely, and for SDOs to be able to receive that money easily. So there are different ways of doing that. Natalee has already touched upon a few issues around the registration process, but there are other ways. For example, having a single overseeing body, or at least few overseeing bodies, can help facilitate the operation for SDOs. It means they do not have to report to so many different departments. There are 4 economies that have a single oversight body. Then there's a few that have 4, 5, or 6, and then it goes up to 43 in Korea. This is at local and national level, but you can only imagine the administrative burden for these organizations to have to report to so many different bodies. When it comes to donations easily flowing, many economies place some restrictions or at least oversight on domestic fundraising. And that's not a bad thing. When it comes to online fundraising or holding events, having governmental oversight through policies is not a bad thing, because it builds trust and accountability on how that money is managed and builds trust for donors. But to have to get permission for all types of fundraising, like SDOs in Bangladesh and Nepal have to do, is extremely burdensome. When it comes to foreign funding, there's 7 economies that inhibit this, meaning that either they have to apply specifically to a government or to the bank to receive foreign funding, or they find that any foreign funding is heavily scrutinized. This is not a very enabling environment for money flowing to social sector organizations. Next slide. Now, Natalee spoke about how funding is a big issue and how most SDOs believe that domestic funding is low. this needs to be incentivized. And there are different fiscal tools that governments have available to them to do this. And one of them is through tax incentives. Now, tax in general, tax policy is not a particularly exciting topic, but when it comes to incentivizing charitable giving, it is extremely important. One, for many people, it can make a difference between donating and not donating, because not only do you do good, but you also get your own personal benefit. But for many philanthropists, this isn't actually the really kind of deciding factor. They don't necessarily care about this. What is more important is that tax incentives also have a very strong signaling effect. The governments are signaling that they value charitable giving and they want to reward you for that. And in a region where individuals and companies take heed of government messages and follow them, this can be a very strong and important message. The good news is that all economies have incentives for corporate donations, and all but Cambodia have them for individual donations. But the potential and the rate ranges from none, obviously, in Cambodia, up to 250% in Singapore, which is, I think, as far as I know, unmet anywhere else in the world. This means that for every dollar that you donate, you can deduct $2.50 from your taxable income or profit, which is pretty generous. And it would be amazing to see more countries and economies follow suit with that. But the full potential of these incentives is held back in many economies by placing a limit on the amount of income or profit that is eligible for this. In fact, only Vietnam and Singapore do not limit this and allow for unlimited tax deductions. In other economies, the governments limit the sectors for which donations might be tax deductible. Now, while this can be a good way to drive funding to specific sectors, at the same time, it does have a market distorting effect and may prevent other areas from receiving much needed funding. Next slide. Now, I mentioned government procurement before, and we believe that this is a really important way for a win-win for everyone. So the government can benefit from the skills and the expertise of SDOs on the ground, while procurement contracts for SDOs can provide a very reliable source of income, as well as, again, that important signaling effect. When the government is procuring goods and services from SDOs, it is signaling that it is recognizing the importance and values these organizations. Now, about 30% of SDOs receive government procurement contracts, which is great, and there's been a very slight improvement, but it still only makes up about 9% proportion of their income, which is actually pretty low. So there is a lot of room to grow there. It also differs quite a bit across the region. In China, 73% of SDOs receive income from procurement contracts, but in the Philippines, this is only 8%. Moreover, it's not always easy to actually get access to this. Getting information about procurement contracts is difficult. SDOs say that it's difficult to actually win these contracts, and about, I think, 60% say that the procurement process or the application process doesn't tend to be very transparent. Now, we wrote a special report on this, a policy brief, CAP's first policy brief, specifically about procurement, and I encourage you all to read that. There's some great examples about how some economies are doing better and implementing policies to encourage this. So please all read that. Next slide. Now, corporate engagement is also an important source of engagement and funding for SDOs. We see that about 50% receive corporate funding, which is great when you know that funding is such an important source of a challenge for SDOs, but there is always room for more. And it's not just funding that companies can provide, and Natalee already alluded to that, but skills and volunteering and sitting on boards for SDOs is also extremely important. So 63% of companies or of SDOs engage with corporate volunteers, and this can be important manpower for actually like doing beach cleanups or planting trees, but skill-based volunteering is also extremely important. most SDOs do not have funding to have a specific IT person or a specific accountant or a lawyer. And being able to get access to this pro bono through corporate volunteering can be extremely beneficial for SDOs. This also goes for sitting on boards and being able to share that expertise through that. Governments also have a role to play to engage and encourage corporate engagement through policies and regulations, either through ESG reporting requirements on the stock exchange, which we see in 9 economies, and hopefully by next year, Korea will have joined this list. And in 6 economies, governments have gone as far as to mandate CSR, but only 2 of those, which are India and Nepal, actually mandate a specific amount of corporate giving. Next slide, please. Now, the final area where there is room for really doing better is helping economies build the capacity of SDOs. We heard it already before, the SDOs struggle with recruiting staff, and 73% struggle with recruiting them, and about 69%, if I'm correct, struggle to retain them. Now, it's not, the problem is usually not that people don't want to work for the social sector. We also ask SDOs whether people are generally wanting to work for the social sector, and they do. People care about it. People want to do good, but you have to, it means sacrificing something. It means sacrificing usually on salary, because SDOs just cannot pay the same level of salaries that you can earn in the for-profit sector. And it's not only that, you also usually miss out on opportunities for building capacity. SDOs don't have the resources to upskill staff or to build on career opportunities internally, because there is just limited funding made available for that, because that type of funding usually comes from operational funding. And most donations, larger donations, are often project-based, which only have a limited percentage available for salary costs or capacity building cost. We hope that their donors do understand the importance of this kind of organizational building. Now, in the past few slides, we have shared just a snapshot of the data that the Doing Good Index actually covers. And next slide. I want to just show something with you, which is our microsite. And this, we encourage you all to visit this, because it is such an amazing resource to explore the data visually. On the landing page, there's some general information, and then you can go to the economy profile pages where you can learn about each country and economy specifically, look at how that economy has performed over time on a variety of indicators. And then you can go to the data dashboard, which I think is the most exciting part, where you can play around with all the data. You can compare Japan in 2024 with Japan in 2020, or with Cambodia in 2020, or with the Asia average. And it's all done in a very visually exciting way. And so I encourage you all to visit this, and hopefully makes something that is quite dry in data for most people to be really engaging. So with that, please do visit that. There'll be a link on the next slide. Because this brings me to the end of the formal presentation. Thank you all for joining us for this. You can download the report or join the microsite through the QR code. I also wanted to share that we are having specific economy specific events in each of the 17 economies, where we will be doing specific in-depth insights on each of the economy performances. So please keep an eye out on that. You can sign up for a newsletter so you can stay up to date on what's happening in the region around the launch of the Doing Good Index. So thank you very much. That means we have some time for questions. I'm happy to take some questions here from the floor, and otherwise there's a few questions online. Would you like to, we'll start with here in the audience.
Yes, thank you.
Annelotte, yes.
And Natalee is very rich, very informational, and I congratulate you on all the efforts. I happen to be teaching in the calls for nonprofits. So it's interesting that you included that in the capacity building. I want to ask one quick question. In the beginning, you said that they could be doing excellent, but it's not there. I know that it's the Center for Asian Philanthropy, but I want to know your benchmark. So which are the countries or economies in the world that would be considered doing excellent, and how far are we from them? And what's the key reason for us having a gap with them?
I think this question has quite a few different components to unpack here. And I'll hand actually over to Natalee to answer part of that. Just for the regional remit, we focus only on Asia. I think to the extent that how other countries and economies would depend on being able to collect the same data. The benchmarks are not objective benchmarks that we would have to collect data, the same questions from these economies to be able to compare them. But let me just hand over to Natalee, who can explain about the doing excellent category and what it would take for an economy to get there.
Yeah, I do agree that it's very difficult to say that there's a country anywhere in the world that all others are aspiring towards, because it's very context specific with what kind of regional, contextually what they're facing. But with our index, we do try to capture some of the main pillars of what we think are enablers for private giving toward the social sector. And so as for what it takes to be doing excellent, I have to say that there's no set criteria. It really depends on where each economy is at with respect to their performance on these sub-indexes. So for example, with Taiwan and with Singapore, who are sitting at doing well, for them, it looks different with what it takes. So for example, in Taiwan, they do really well in a lot of different dimensions, but in the tax area, they place a limit on the income eligible for deduction. And so if that's removed, then that would push them closer to doing excellent. And in both economies, Singapore and Taiwan, they struggle with finding talent. And so those are also two barriers to them pushing towards the doing excellent mark. And so it would take improvements across the board, I would say, to within our index that only captures a little bit of what the fuller picture is to that.
But I think we should put this out as a challenge, and we hope to see as economies are progressing in the future to see an economy of that category. Is there anyone else here in the room that would like to ask a question? Otherwise, I also have some online. In that case, but please feel free to raise your hand. We have here a question. Has Asia improved on the DGI since this initiative began, and are policymakers using this valuable data? Again, kind of two questions. Whether Asia as a region has improved is difficult to say. If we purely look at the Doing Good Index, to some extent, the answer is yes, because more economies have moved up in the different clusters, and actually none have been moving down. So by that indicator, yes, they have. Also, if you look at some indicators, we are seeing general positive progress, especially when it comes to government procurement, albeit very slow. Corporate engagement, we are seeing improvement over time. When it comes to regulations, it's a little bit more mixed progress there, as well as there are societal challenges that we've seen. Like the recruitment challenge has only been getting bigger and bigger. So it really kind of depends on which indicators we're looking at. And the second part of the question, are policymakers using this valuable data? Very good question. We hope they are. We are engaging with governments on our data. In fact, just a few days ago, Ruth was in Indonesia meeting with representatives from the Prime Minister's office in Indonesia to talk about the findings and the implications for Indonesia. In the past, we have also engaged with the government here in Hong Kong. In Nepal, there have been engagements and conversations with government representatives. And in Korea, yes, and we were involved in a consultation process on the social sector there. So yes, we are engaging with governments. We hope to see more of that. We are working with our partner organizations in these economies to also expand on that more. There's another question here about Singapore and Taiwan both doing well, but these are small nations. Can their success be compared with larger nations? I think it's true that it is much easier for a country like Singapore to be able to put in place enabling regulations and to work very engagingly with the social sector compared to, say, to do the same in India. However, so the exact model might not be replicated, but what you can learn from this are lessons and look at some of the factors that are working well. I don't think you can ever replicate a single model to a different economy that has such a different political system, economic system, and cultural background, but there are lessons to be learned from all of these different kind of success stories or positive stories that can be translated into other economies. Do I still have time for one more? Oh, we have one more in the audience.
I think it's reflecting on what you just said. Some of the regulations in place seem to enable local giving, but may get in the way of reducing intra-regional inequality, which is super high, right? If you compare Singapore to Myanmar, for example, you would want to ease resources flow towards those countries. On that may some of the regulation, I'm thinking in Singapore in particular, may get in the way of that. So would you consider looking at that, looking at how the wealth in Asia could be regulation could help redistributing that to where needs are higher?
Great question. You're right that our index doesn't capture that because we only look whether these incentives, tax incentives give or these regulations exist, not so much in terms of the tax incentives, whether they exist for overseas giving, although it is covered in the flow of funds. We do look at how easy it is to give to overseas. I think it is something that needs to be encouraged. You're right that the giving and receiving and the need is disproportionate. I see Ruth is sitting here. She wants to. Ruth, come and join.
I have to jump in on this one. I'm sorry. So Asia is primarily still made up of emerging markets. If you put aside Japan, Korea, Singapore, and Chinese Taipei, these are all emerging markets. So they have plenty of needs in their home country. So the attitude of the government and the attitude of many philanthropists and companies is, I'm going to help my place, my people, my community first. So there is less cross-border giving in Asia than in other parts of the world for that reason. And also philanthropy, this has been a big argument in the United States. Philanthropy is not meant to solve the problem of income disparity. I mean, it was one of the, it's part of, there's an Indian opinion writer, Anand Giridharadas, who says many wealthy people, if they really wanted to help, they just give, their money away, or they would support programs to have much more serious tax regimens to tax them down. But that's not what happens. So we're not here to say the world is unequal and we're solving for that. We're saying people have money and they want to help. How can we maximize that? So I just want to be clear about what this index is looking at and what is not included. But your aspirations are very noble.
I think we've been told that we are out of time. there are a few more questions on the chat that we will try and answer separately. And please, in general, if anyone does have any further questions, feel free to email us at research@caps.org, and we'll try our best to answer any further questions. And with that, you're already standing, so I will hand over to you.
Okay, great. So now, Ronnie, you're up. And now we're gonna hopefully Nirvana is back, right? So now we're gonna have a conversation about philanthropy, and we have with us two of our most important supporters, our chair, Ronnie Chan from Hong Kong, and hopefully Nirvana Chaudhary from Nepal. That is not a picture of Nepal. Obviously, as we wait for Nirvana to come up,
People are seeing him.
they're seeing him online.
Yes, just not.
We're just not seeing him. Okay. Oh, there he is. Hello. Okay. So these are two very different economies, Hong Kong and Nepal. Nepal has great needs, is one of the poorer countries of the world. Nirvana, you can see okay, right?
Yes, Ruth, thank you. I can see you. Hi, Uncle Ronnie, how are you?
And Hong Kong is one of the wealthier parts of Asia. And yet philanthropy is very important in both places. So let me start by asking there's to the earlier point, no one would argue that philanthropy is going to replace government expenditure. The amounts are just, even the most generous, it's still minuscule compared to how much government spend. So let me start with you, Nirvana. What's the role of philanthropy in your mind?
Thank you so much, Ruth. Firstly, I'm quite happy to see the name of the room you're sitting in, Everest. I can see a little bit of Nepal in Hong Kong. I think it's in the door behind.
I should just add that Nirvana is sitting in his office and he can really see Everest from there. So it's kind of not fair, but we're doing our best.
Right. So, Ruth, I think, philanthropy is, from our perspective, philanthropy is, from a corporate family's perspective, something which is a vision that is set by a founder or leading family members who set across a task of making a difference in a particular field or in various fields in their particular economy. And it goes beyond just charity. It's not something which a charity dollar has one life, but a philanthropic dollar has multiple lives. And that is exactly the role and vision of how corporate philanthropies function. They set out in eradicating or working towards a social problem, and they leverage whatever they have in their corporate infrastructure, the network, and they move towards a private sector mindset of addressing those challenges by thinking of how a private sector would engage in doing a business, but for good philanthropic aspect. But the returns are measured not in terms of profit, but in terms of the impact you create.
So I think that's really important. Nirvana, you're saying that because philanthropy generally comes from business people who have made money, they use those tools and that thinking to really create, in effect, better models and strategies of bringing about change. So the notion of philanthropy as providing pilots, of kind of testing different strategies, of being the risk capital to try new things is really important. Ronnie, what do you think philanthropy is for?
Well, you can answer. Well, there are many layers to this question.
Go with whatever you want.
At the most basic level, it is for your own joy and satisfaction, knowing that you have done well for society. But in terms of more acceptable considerations, I think one of the things that philanthropy really can do, as you well said, philanthropy cannot solve most of the problems in the world. So how do you leverage it is really an interesting question. If one can leverage his or her dollars to do $2 work or $3 work, that's best. And I think one of the Hong Kong philanthropists, unfortunately, she passed away. I know you know who I'm talking about. She used her philanthropic dollars to vaccinate the poorest country in China. And that the province, sorry, and that forced the government to vaccinate the whole country. Now that's great, right? One philanthropist in one poor province that was so successful that the government become, shall we say, a little embarrassed maybe, that they have to do it for the whole country. And so, those are the two extremes of it. There's another one, another Hong Kong philanthropist, by the way, who use philanthropic dollars to take high risks, things that businesses won't do, because when you consider the risk that is involved, you say forget it. Or government, neither will government do it. So they take high risk in order to high returns. You know who I'm talking about as well. These are all supporters of CAPS.
Otherwise, we can't mention them.
Anyway, so I think that ingenuity, creativity is really something that can abound in this space, which I think the world has yet to, frankly, scratch the surface. People who make a lot of money usually are pretty creative people in order to make money. I think if they were to apply the same creativity to philanthropic activities, I think the sky is the limit. I think the world, unless the world go to pots in the next couple of years. Otherwise, I think philanthropy in the coming years should be a golden era in the sense that we should be able to see a lot of ingenuity, ingenious things that are happening in this space, and in particular in Asia, because it's really quite new at this, unlike in Europe or in the US in particular that have been doing it for a long time. We're quite new, but we have a lot of young people that are really entrepreneurial, like Philippines. Entrepreneurial,
like this guy,
and so I think that it's really a pretty exciting space to watch what may happen tomorrow.
Nirvana, can you share with us an example that you know about from Nepal, either from the Chaudhary Foundation or someone else, where philanthropy in effect demonstrated the viability of something and the government then picked it up?
Yeah, of course. So government, given the sheer complexity and scale of what they need to tackle, right? I mean, by the time the bureaucratic hurdles come in, policies come in, that emergency disaster that had just struck on, it cannot get mitigated so fast. And that's where the private sector speed and efficiency comes in. I can share with you an example, which I've shared with you, is like, for example, in 2015, Nepal had this devastating earthquake. And, we had about 10,000 people who died, 700,000 homes that were either damaged or destroyed. Now, I'm a firm believer that a private sector, if they're able to leverage their infrastructure, the private sector's infrastructure, resources, network, they can, like Uncle Ronnie just mentioned, that $1 can become $10. And the way we did it was that because our company was into schools, we opened up 15 of our schools as relief centers. Because our company is a healthcare company, we could immediately in 3 hours time provide relief material, not only in the schools, but because we had 2,000 sales force on the field, we knew exactly which home or which family were affected by the earthquake. And then the government and various multilateral agencies were using our sales staff data points to really find out about which homes or families. Now, because homes were affected or damaged, in 15 days' time, we could construct a new home, transition shelter, give it away. In 1 year's time, we gave away 5,500 homes, built 55 schools, 22 digital classrooms, 20 clean water drinking systems, rebuilt an entire village with 118 permanent homes and a community center, and trained 7,000 people. Now, it took our government 1 year just to figure out what was going on. okay, how can we rebuild Nepal? What policies we can give? Similarly, in COVID, we already in 2-3 months before COVID hit, we started to already distribute a lot of the PPE kits, start building oxygen plants. Government has their own bureaucratic processes, especially in developing countries like Nepal. And private sector comes in and immediately does the intervention in their own limited ways. And there's no end to how much we can do. Ways we provided in oxygen plants, building capacity for creating a track to infectious disease center. But in all of this, we were continuously partnering with local governments. We were continuously partnering with local NGOs. We were continuously partnering with different stakeholders who had the knowledge and experience, but we knew that we had the skill set of execution. So when you bring about all the stakeholders with the right skill set, then that becomes the right PPP model or the right partnership for the perfect execution.
Okay, you're setting the bar high if it's the perfect execution. That's pretty good. So I want to just ask you, Ronnie, a lot of your philanthropy, your family philanthropy, is not through Hung Lung, but your family has the Morningside Foundation. Nirvana, in your case, your family philanthropy is pretty much routed through the Chaudhary Foundation, which is one and the same with the Chaudhary group. I want to just talk about how this plays out, because in the West, personal philanthropy and corporate philanthropy are pretty much delinked. In Asia, it tends to be more linked. What are your views about this? Let's start with Ronnie. What are the upsides or the downsides of linking or not linking personal philanthropy with corporate?
Well, first of all, in the West, many big companies at least are already public entities.
Right.
And so the family's participation is much less, at least in terms of equity ownership. And so the corporates and the private sectors are quite different. But that said, in much of the West, a lot of medium-sized, small-sized companies are still very much family-oriented. So really, what you are contrasting is really the big corporates, the public entities versus the private. But in this part of the world, in Asia, with the exception of perhaps Japan and Korea, much of the Japan and Korea, much of the companies are still directly linked to a particular family. And so as a result, the two tend to blend together. But that said, it really depends on the corporate governance. If the governance is good, then there will be no misuse. But at another level, you may say that if the company is a family-owned company anyway, then whether it comes from the private foundation or from the company, which may have a few other outside investors, but still it's basically family. So it's really more or less one in the same. So if that's the case, then as long as you're doing good for society, it really doesn't matter. As long as the governance segment of it is handled properly.
Well, my observation of Asia has been that when people invest in a lot of companies in Asia, they're investing into the families. They know very well who the dominant shareholder is, and they're investing into them because they believe Li Ka-shing will continue to make money, and so they invest in Cheong Kong, for example. Same with Chaudhary and Hung Lung. So there is a little bit more latitude, maybe, for Asian companies to kind of take a more longer-term view, a more expansive view, and really build up the societies and the communities in which that family is living and the company is operating. What are your thoughts on this, Nirvana?
So, Ruth, we still consider ourselves a small, it's 100% owned family company, right? But our strategy is very, very clear, and it comes out from 3 different narratives. Number one is we have a family constitution. All of us as family decide, okay, these are the areas which we need to make a difference in our homeland, Nepal. Areas which are not getting proper attention or that we can make a difference. So, for example, health, and within health we focus on mother and child and stunting, and within stunting nutrition, etc. Similarly, we've got 4 or 5 areas we focus on at large, right, as a group. Again, areas that us as a group can network, leverage our infrastructure and make a bigger impact. But then on personal capacity, I run my own foundation, which I don't think my parents also know about, which I personally,
They will now.
I personally, I support a lot of orphanages. I support a lot of animal shelters. I do a lot of scholarships, but that might not necessarily fit in with our family philanthropic office, right? So I draw a completely, a Chinese wall between both of these initiatives. That's my personal initiatives, what I personally believe. But when I'm wearing a hat of someone who's heading our families or groups foundation, I'm wearing a completely different hat. And then on third side, I mean, we are present in about 25, 30 countries. Then we have to go country specific, what our business is doing and what we can do in that countries in our own way. So like in India, we're doing a lot of work only on digital classrooms or impact investments. In Moldova, we're doing work on leveraging our telecom company and doing work on, again, social entrepreneurship and using technology to provide access to finance for young entrepreneurs. Other countries, similar other things we're doing, but that necessarily might not be aligned with our strategy for our homegrown foundation. So it's a very three different strategies we follow. Except for my personal one, the other 2 are well discussed, debated, well thought about, and then we put all the team and resources together for that.
That's great. Okay, I wanted to ask you both. We just heard about the Doing Good Index, and in this index, 3 out of 4 of the sets of indicators really go to government policies, both regulations, tax and fiscal policies, and procurement policies. And as Annelotte and Natalee were saying, government looms large in Asia. Most people who have wealth want to work aligned with, at the minimum, in partnership, often with government. You yourself, Nirvana, said that you work with government regularly with the projects. But yet we saw from the Doing Good Index that the regulations are really mixed. Many times governments in Asia say, we don't know what to do with this philanthropic center. We don't know what to do with these STOs. We're supposed to be solving for education. We're supposed to be solving for health. So what's our role in enabling this sector? And should we really enable the sector? And so you get mixed messages and mixed policies. What do you think, Nirvana, the role of government should be in helping private individuals, families, and companies, and then the organizations that receive their support prosper and flourish? What is the role of government there, if any?
Ruth, I frankly feel in the current context of Nepal, the role of the government is just creating the right policies. That's it. We work with them not on any project, but we tell them, okay, you know what, we want to rebuild this village. Please give us the approvals on time. Please create an environment where we're able to, bring in or do certain initiatives. Don't put any roadblocks, but become an enabler. But that doesn't mean we take anything from the government. That doesn't mean we collaborate with the government for any project. We just expect them to have the right policies. Now, I'll just give you 2 very simple things that happened in the last 1 week. Our government announced a new budget, right? In the budget, we were lobbying to the government saying that, our foundation engages a lot on youth development through sports and education. So the government sort of addressed that and said any corporates in Nepal that are sort of sponsoring or investing in sports will be considered as CSR. Now, a week or 10 days time, we are seeing maybe 20 times more companies saying, hey, what can we do to, strengthen cricket academies or football leagues or provide more grassroots level sport stadiums, infrastructure. So, that one policy just has already started changing the narrative of youth development through sports, which is also, I consider, a very important aspect of philanthropy. Similarly, on a larger scale, when we're talking about climate change, our government came up with a policy of having a huge parity between taxes and duties on electric vehicles versus conventional ICE vehicles. And in 2 years' time, we are seeing Nepal as the fastest growing EV market in the world. The highest penetration rate of EVs in the world today is Nepal. 7 out of 10 vehicles sold are Nepal because of that one policy. And how is that fitting into philanthropy? Because all the countries in our part of the world said by 2030, we're going to make sure 35% of all the vehicles are EV. Now, unless those policies are not done today, we will not be able to achieve those 2030 goals. So, that one right policy is what we need as from private sector. The rest, we know to a large extent what we need to do.
Okay, Ronnie, there is a specific question about how can we get the Hong Kong government to enable philanthropy and the social sector more. So I don't know if you want to answer for Hong Kong or more broadly, but how do you feel government, what's their role in enabling kind of this, the private social investment?
Ruth, I don't want to say too much because it's no one size fit all.
Right, okay.
Different countries and different economic development, the geography is different, the culture is different. So you really cannot say one size fits all. And you have big countries or small countries. China, for example, when the Wenchuan earthquake happened a couple of years ago, the government realized, wow, the first one who reaches the needy places are actually private sector organization. It shocked them, surprised them. It caused them to rethink about the role of private SDOs in the entire mix of the Chinese society. Even Singapore, which is a far more advanced society in terms of per capita income, for example, Singapore was never, the government didn't do a whole lot on the philanthropy side until the last couple of years. They realized, wow, although we don't have a lot of private wealth because the government is a big part of the economy, but we can make Singapore into a philanthropy center. And so they also see the need to encourage their own citizens to give and hence the 250% for tax deduction. And so they then change the policies to push both for Singaporeans, local citizens, to participate more in philanthropy, as well as to help make Singapore into a so-called philanthropic center. And so, different countries really have a very, very different role. I think the Hong Kong situation is actually not a bad one. Everybody had improved, no question about it. And I'm not sure if to be in the far right of the four categories is necessarily the best. I can argue that it may not be the best to be in the far right, meaning the so-called, the better, what do you call it?
Doing well.
Doing well, right. Maybe the second category is good enough, or maybe even better in some ways. You don't want to be in the last two, that's for sure, especially the last one. Take Hong Kong, for example. Hong Kong is not perfect. As you and I know that when we did this Doing Good Index in the past, we realized Hong Kong is very difficult to register a nonprofit. One of the most difficult, probably. And is it bad or is it bad or is it good? Well, you may say it's not good, but on the other hand, it also means that the regulation is rigorous.
Right.
It doesn't have a lot of hanky-panky stuff going on. That if you're accepted by the government as a nonprofit organization for tax purposes, then you're basically quite legit, right? So I think that Hong Kong is not a bad thing. I think what to me is very precious, which I don't know how to do it. Maybe you can study it. Is how to encourage giving that is from the heart, rather than just giving. I always tell people $100. I had $200 bills. This $100 bill is not the same as the other $100 bill. in a purely outward value-wise, monetary value-wise, it's the same. But one may have, I don't know, expertise come with it, network come with it, right? And allow me to say, one has the heart coming with it. And
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, not mutually, but you cannot define it easily, right?
Right.
So how do you define it? I don't know how to define it. But whatever it is, I think that, for example, you can argue that in Hong Kong, the philanthropic activities are more genuine because the tax reduction is not that high.
Right.
And so people give because of the goodness of their heart, rather than just because, 250%. I'm not against 250%, but or in the United States, the same thing, right? The tax is a big reason for giving, which I think is a great system that encourage a lot of giving, which then relieve the government partially from a lot of social delivery that can be done by the private sector. So it is not a all or none. Neither should we think that go to the one extreme is always the best. I think that I'm pretty comfortable with the situation in Hong Kong as far as philanthropy is concerned. I think people are genuinely very generous from the heart.
I sometimes use the some of you may have heard me say this, that regulations are like cholesterol, that good regulations are good cholesterol. They allow the system to flow, and bad cholesterol and bad regulations gum things up. So you need regulations. You can't just not have any regulations, but you need the right sizing of regulations, the right regulations that you were talking about, Nirvana, to kind of spur on good behavior and allow innovation and organizations to flourish. Okay, so I just want to ask both of you, you have both worked with a variety of nonprofit organizations. Nonprofit organizations, there are several questions here saying basically the lament of nonprofits. How can we raise more money? How can we raise more money? I get asked that all the time. You guys must be asked that all the time. I can tell you what my answer is after you tell me what your answers are.
After Nirvana answer, we not need your answer nor mine.
Yeah, Nirvana will just give us the best answer. But Nirvana, what do you say to organizations? You live in a poor country, you get asked all the time, what can nonprofits do to kind of improve their lot in life?
So, Ruth, the way we handle stuff in our partnerships, right? Like we understand Nepal, but we want to tackle a particular area that we do not have any idea in. So we partner with, let's say, for example, the Gates Foundation, who've done a lot of work on health. Now, so what we do is that in Nepal, reading your report, one in every 574 people, there's an NGO in Nepal. That means there are 43,000 NGOs, registered NGOs in Nepal. That's a large number for a country like Nepal with 30 million people. So normally what we've seen where the disconnect happens is that, 40 to 50% of every dollar they get goes into overheads, and it's only the 50% of the money goes in the real cause. Out of the 50%, given the different layers of red tapeism, inefficiency, etc., we've sort of noticed from our foundation that 15 to 20% of that dollar goes into the real cause, right? So when a private company if our foundation works in a zero overheads model, where if we are putting in every penny, it's putting into the cause that is transparent, that can be measurable. And that's how a lot of companies or corporates or foundations get that comfort level, that we've got someone who's also matching our fund and we're providing the know-how, they're providing the local know-how with the execution of it. So I think this model for us has really, really worked. But again, just to add very quickly, I'm undertaking a massive task now of creating a group of maybe 25, 30 different organizations on being part of the Third Pole Summit. Nepal is the custodian of the trans-Himalayan region, which consists of 9 countries. That's about 1.9 billion people living around Nepal and the Himalayan mountains, which are depleting every day. While the world is melting by 0.03 degree, annually Nepal is melting by 0.05 degree. We have 240 million people living around these Himalayan mountains. If we don't fix our problem now, forget about irrigation, agriculture, floods, and all these natural disasters. The entire 8-9 countries are going to be underwater, over a period of time, 25. So I'm undertaking a task where, from a small foundation, what can I do? So I'm leading this, but I'm getting government stakeholders involved. I've got World Economic Forum involved. I've got Gates Foundation involved. I've got people who've got expertise like ISIMO, WWF, people who are already doing a lot of things in this space, but have not come together collectively to collaborate, where the result will be much, much, much bigger, because they are in isolation doing their work. But what is required is so big that I'm undertaking this task, this role from our foundation, where I'm trying to bring everyone together and collectively collaborate and do something about a theme that we come up called the Third Pole Summit. So
Nirvana, I think you've touched on something really important, which is collaboration, right? And if you go to any conference these days, people talk about collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. It's important, but it's really hard to do in reality, because all these organizations you're talking about have their own agendas. Have you figured out how to do collaboration?
Sorry, Ruth, so you're asking me about?
Yeah, I'm asking you. You have this very grand vision, and you're right. These problems are very big, and people know they need to collaborate, but it's not that easy in real life. So have you figured out how you're gonna get all of these organizations to collaborate?
Oh yeah, I have. See, because one thing what Uncle Ronnie also said, if you want to really create an impact on philanthropy, the leader needs to have a very, very clear vision and a clear heart. Okay, they need to be so passionate, like they're passionate of creating $1 billion company. They need to be passionate of making a difference in climate change, and they think with the same kind of fire in their belly to do it. And this is something that emerged probably 4 months ago, and today we have already got about 25-30 partners. Now, why would they collaborate with us? Because we have a proven track record, like you'd have in business. Why would a private for-profit company partner with you for a joint venture for a business? If they see you have a track record, if they see you have the right strengths, the right competency, the right people, the right ideas, I mean, they would also want to enter into a new area in terms of business. Same thing, I think, works on how the development sector thinks as well. They want to multiply that dollar investment they've got, which normally they would have, not got that much of a return for. So it's working. It's a Herculean task. I will say step 10, we are in step 1 or 2 right now. But till the time I don't achieve this, I'm not gonna sleep.
Oh my goodness. So you're threatening them.
Well, I think it's over a period of time I've realized that Nepal has to be the custodian for that. We are known for our Himalayan region, and in the beginning of the call, I mentioned I see behind Uncle Ronnie the door is etched with Everest.
Yes.
Everest in your room, and I'm here trying to protect Everest, and in our own little way, I want to do something about it.
I will ask Ronnie to answer this question about collaboration, but if there's questions from the audience here, please go ahead and start raising your hand. Ronnie, you have worked with many philanthropic efforts in which there's quite a few funders. Are there certain rules to the road to effective collaboration?
Let me answer your question a different way.
Okay.
Not exactly what you asked. Let me give a test to everybody here in the audience. There's one country in Asia that I know of where I see the most collaboration among wealthy individuals, among philanthropists, that they pull their resources together to do a common good. This is not a SDO working with another SDO, with another collaborating with another SDO, okay? This is pulling the money because you started the question by talking about money. All the nonprofits are asking for, saying that money is the biggest thing, biggest need. Which country is that? In Asia. Now, I don't have scientific proof of it, but I travel around all over Asia all the time, and I have empirical.
Anecdotally,
Yeah, but it's.
as observed by Ronnie Chan. Okay. Phil.
Which I think is a pretty, not a bad stat.
Definitely.
Which country would that be? What would you say? Anyone know? Huh?
Singapore.
Singapore, who said that? A little bit, but China. Absolutely. China. And of course, I understand the social and political reason behind it, that nobody wants to stick their heads up, but everyone want to do good for society. So they band together, which is a safer way to go, perhaps. But I have never seen a country anywhere in the world, and I've been moving about in the philanthropic space around the world, both in North America and a little bit in Europe for many decades. And I've never seen a country that have more collaboration among the philanthropists like in China. And I think this is another way of looking at philanthropy in the longer run, that not everybody is a Bill Gates. And not every philanthropist is a Bill Gates. There's only one Bill Gates, only a few of those of that dollar size, right? And how do you pull resources together, money in particular and expertise, of course, but primarily money first, to do a common good? I think that is really something that is worth contemplating for all of us. That is really quite exciting. And then let me say one last thing, and that is what is needed is not just money. 30 years ago, I helped an organization, my family helped an organization at an SDO. We sort of know it, that they were in desperate need. 30 years later, in their 30th anniversary, they were still telling everybody that my family saved that organization because they were ready to close shop after the first 2-3 years because of the shortage of finances. My family came along with, I forgot, 7 million or 9 million Hong Kong dollars, not a particular big sum, but for them, it was a big sum, and it saved the organization. But as I look back, I said, my contribution to that organization, because they invited me to their 30th anniversary, my biggest contribution is not the 7 million, 9 million, whatever my family gave them 30 years ago. Rather, I introduced them to one person. I brought a gentleman who is a friend of mine, who is the executive director of one of the biggest, well, I'll mention it, real estate company in Hong Kong, who just retired. But he has a good heart and a lot of expertise. And that guy
took it on.
Eventually became the chair of the board. After he helped them got some land in Hong Kong.
Okay. Well, that's the key.
And they helped them build in fantastic facilities that became really the anchor of the very good work that I started to support 30 years ago. And so it is not just my bringing my money, but there are many other assets that we can think about, that we can bring to play. That I was so proud at the 30th anniversary, not because my family gave them money and saved them at the beginning, but because this guy did so much good for that organization. And so I think my point is there are many ways to contribute. And you don't have to be a Ronnie Chan. You don't have to give 7 million or 9 million, whatever, in order to bring that guy in. You have a heart.
Right.
And if you know that guy and you know the need, anyone could have brought that person in, and their contribution would be far more than what my 7 million or 9 million would have ever done.
So networks are important.
It's very, very important. And it's not just network, but expertise.
expertise. Any questions from the group here? Okay, then in that case, we are running out of time anyway, because I spoke mostly, which is always what I do. So Nirvana, final thoughts about the kind of the evolution of philanthropy in your lifetime, and how do you see the thinking about this sector changing?
Yes, absolutely. I'm seeing a massive change. I'm also seeing the younger generation are far more, you call it because of their access to information globally, they're becoming far more aware of the problems around the world, far more aware of the problems in their environment. I think when I've interacted with the youth in the new generation, they want to do something, and they're thinking like if they want to do something in the not-for-profit space, they're thinking like a startup of a business venture as well. That, I'll have to put together a plan in place, the right people in place. I'll have to think big but start small, and I'll have to prove my way. And then I think there's so many philanthropies out there that do not know where to put their funds in. But if they see the right organization who have made that impactful, quantifiable difference, I think the philanthropic capital will follow you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very exciting. And we live in a world where it used to be 30 years ago, there was the nonprofit philanthropic side, the for-profit investment side, and nothing in the middle. And now there's a lot in the middle with different kinds of financial tools being brought to bear. And that creates a lot of opportunity and innovation. Ronnie, what about you? You've been around a little bit longer than Nirvana.
Nirvana called me Uncle Ronnie. I was so embarrassed. Say hello to your father. He's a wonderful guy. And thank you for receiving the philanthropist that CAPS is going to bring to your country later this year. We all look forward to it. You have a wonderful program.
Ronnie said he would go to the Everest Base Camp.
I will, but I changed my other schedule in order to fit in your schedule. Thank you very much. But anyway, to answer the question, first of all, I don't want to be just backward looking. I want to be forward looking, because this is the industry that is very, very young. Allow me to use the word industry. This is a sector that is very, very young, and sky is the limit. As long as the world doesn't come to a close, doesn't come to a termination anytime soon, I think this sector will have a lot. And if the world moves in the wrong direction, this sector will have may have more innovation and creativity yet to be seen. So I want to be forward looking, and I just see a future for this sector which is very, very exciting and bright. And the use of intellectual capital marrying with financial capital, I think can do tremendous amount. In fact, I'm of the opinion, and I run a number of nonprofits. I always tell people that the beauty of an organization such as CAPS is that we don't have that much money.
It's beautiful.
Of course, Ruth being the CEO, I can understand the pressure that she is under in order to raise funds, and she's very good at it herself. But I always tell her, I say, hey, having too much money is not necessarily the best thing. And, there's somebody who raised close to $1 billion just to do philanthropy. I said, you got to be kidding me. What the heck's going on? You don't need that much money. In fact, having too much money is a bad thing. Just like a young kid growing up, having too much money is a bad thing. I turned out okay because when I was young, I wasn't that wealthy. I was usually the poorer part of the 40 students in my class. And I made sure that when my son grew up, he is among only in the middle of the pile rather than at the top of the pile. And so not having money, not having a lot of money is actually not a bad thing. And it really genders creativity and make you work hard to use your brain in order to make up for whatever you don't have in your wallet. And I, for one, don't denigrate money. I'm a business guy. I know the need, and I run nonprofits. And one of the nonprofits that I'm running is running out of cash as we speak. Okay, we may have to sell some of our investments in order to make ends meet. So I fully recognize the necessity and value of money. But that said,
it's not the be all and end. It reminds me of that in the United States, there used to be a car rental company, Avis, which was always number 2. And their motto was, we're number 2, we try harder. So I think that's what you're saying. You need, you need that grit.
Yeah, and I just want to correct some misunderstanding that having money is always good for nonprofits. Not necessarily. Same with businessmen. A lot of fund management company, money chased them, and eventually that's how they make mistakes. And for different reasons, for nonprofit, I think it's the same thing. So somebody raise hundreds of millions of dollars to run a nonprofit organization. I said that guy's going to fail because he doesn't know what the heck is going on in this space. And so I'm very happy that cash, we just barely have enough. Anybody want to give us a little bit more? I tell people I'm the biggest beggar in town. I beg for money because I run several nonprofit organizations and I'm proud of it.
Yes, ma'am, one question.
Oh, yeah, while Nirvana is on, can I ask if you feel that in Nepal, the collaboration of philanthropists would be good? Or is it you would see that going forward, just more philanthropists doing their own things or doing good in their own ways will be good? Ronnie, can you translate?
No, you heard that, right, Nirvana?
Yeah, I heard it. I heard it. I think unfortunately, I mean, Nepal for the last 3 decades, we've had, let's say 30 years, we've had 29 governments. We've had such a politically unstable economy for the last 30 years. 6,000 youths leaving the country every day because they're frustrated, right? So everyone's mindset is towards how are we going to just survive our for-profit business? How are we going to make ends meet or grow our economic situation? So I believe it or not, from private sector, I can name in my fingers how many people are really thinking like philanthropists in Nepal. But the newer generation who just got into those businesses, one of the first things they're doing while even doing businesses, they're aligning their reports on SDGs, they're aligning their reports on ESGs, and they're trying to do good through their business, even if it creates whatever impact. I think in Nepal, one of the biggest problems we've had is we've got far too many nonprofits and NGOs, and not too much impact in the right areas, in the different parts of Nepal. I don't think that's really given the right message out, not only to within the country's private sector and philanthropists, but even externally. I'm referring to the data in the current Doing Good Index. 65-70% of our support comes in from foreign funds, like organizations like World Bank, ADB, multilateral agencies. So that size of fund, anyone who tries to do anything locally gets disappeared, even if they're trying to do something small. So I think the tides are turning, but very slowly. And I think more and more people having that exposure to doing good are coming back or are trying to make a genuine effort to collaborate and amplify their impact by collaborating with NGOs who are already doing work in that space. So I might not know anything about nutrition, but if I find the right partner who's doing work, then the mindset is already changing of me allocating my philanthropic capital into for those needs. Does that answer your question? I heard bits and pieces.
Yeah, it gives a view of the landscape.
Thank you. In Nepal, it's really important to get a view of the landscape. It's quite beautiful. Okay, so I want to then thank Nirvana, and Ronnie's going to make some closing remarks, Nirvana, but I really want to thank Ronnie and Nirvana for sharing their thoughts with us.
Well, I really don't want to make any closing remarks. I think that's good enough. I think we have had a good discussion.
But I wrote out talking points.
I read it, but I never listened. But anyway.
I know.
So the message that I want to convey is simple. This is a sector which will not solve the society's problem, but it will make life a lot more beautiful.
For both the givers and the receivers, right?
The giver, receiver, as well as the whole atmosphere in society.
Right.
So I think that this sector, the impact is not one that is, very hard. Only the guy couldn't pay for his hospital bill. Now he can pay for a hospital bill and save his life. That's very hard need and met that is met. But I think there's a lot of other softer side of philanthropy that will enrich society, which people don't talk about much or can hardly be quantified. But I think nonetheless, it is something that is very real. And I think there's example is more powerful than just hard analytical data and analyses. And you have to be very pragmatic. Which is better? Should we all collaborate? I don't care. As long as some social needs are met, however way it is meant to be, it's okay. So I think that we need a broad heart in order to be in this sector and not think that I have the way, nobody has the way. But let's make sure that every society finds its way in order to do better for its citizens as well as for the society at large. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Say hello to your father.
We have some food and drinks in the back. Help yourself, and thank you very much for coming. And for those online, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in person when we go and do our roadshow with the Doing Good Index. Bye-bye.